talking about for today's review. We're going to be talking about ThunderCats #1. It's a new Dynamite comic. I'm very excited because I feel like I'm pretty big fan of ThunderCats as a concept. Like I don't remember a lot of the mythology, especially going into this. Like I don't remember a lot of the mythology. We'll probably stay away from a lot of spoilers, but let's talk about first the creative team here. We have DECLAN SHALVEY is doing the writing, and then Drew Moss is working on the art. So we'll get to look at that in a second. So before we get into that, let me read you a little bit of what's going on here to get you caught up. Fleeing through space to escape their dying homeworld, the ThunderCats were attacked en route by their mortal enemies, the mutants of Plundar. After diverting their damaged flagship to a planet called Third Earth, the surviving ThunderCats now strive to rebuild their society in harmony with the new world's natives, but the mutants determined to possess the ThunderCats' mystical gem, the Eye of Thundera, have tracked them down, and they've also forged an alliance with Mumra, the devil priest of Third Earth. Now the ThunderCats, led by an inexperienced Lionel, must band together as never before to protect their legacy from this combined enemy. But they will be able to. Will they be able to withstand the onslaught of Mumra, the ever living, once he sets eyes upon them? So, let me bring back Josh.
Sorry.
So we've covered what the ThunderCats is kind of going to be about, but have you? Well, I guess Jeff, I'll go to you first. Without going into deep any spoilers, which I don't know that how much you can spoil this book, but what did you think of this book?
I thought it was okay. Yeah, if you're familiar with the ThunderCats in any form or fashion, there's not much to spoil in this book. It pretty much gives it's a origin story book, but I remember the first two. I vaguely remember watching the first two episodes of the 1980s cartoon. It basically covers what happened in the first two episodes of that cartoon in this book. And I think the reboot from 2011, kind of the first episode of that is kind of the first issue of this book. So if you're familiar with the ThunderCats in any form or fashion, there's no surprises for you here. It's a very straightforward kind of retelling.
Well, there is one surprise though, right? There's a big twist at the end, I thought, unless there's something I'm not remembering about the original series.
I think Josh may be right, and maybe we'll need to go back and look. I think obviously I don't think
it's on Hulu.
I think obviously the purpose of the series is obviously is not just to like redo the adaptation of the series. I think the creators want to tell their own story, but from what I've seen online, they're pretty big fans. So I really thought, and let me pull up some of the preview art. I really thought it was very efficient when it came to the storytelling. Like we know that if you're buying this book, you're probably at least you probably know the ThunderCats a little bit. But it's very clear, like it's very straightforward with these are the first 3 pages, or I guess the first page and the big splash. So introducing everyone, I think they also give you very clear characterizations of each of these characters, like especially Panthro. Like you kind of learn everything you need to know about him within a conversation with Lionel in this issue. I was telling Josh before we started recording, I didn't remember that Lionel was supposed to be the same age as the other kids, and then his capsule didn't hold up, so he aged. So they kind of go over that in here in the preview pages. So I didn't remember that, so that came as quite a shock just to see, like, it really puts everything in a different context. So that was a lot of fun. But Josh, what did you think of the book overall?
Yeah, I had kind of the same experience as Jeff. Honestly, I was reading it going, okay, this feels very much like it's rehashing the original episode, right? I agree with you, Danny. I think it does so very effectively, right? That first page is beautiful, and just in the fact that it is setting up everything you need to know without showing you a single character, right?
Yeah.
Even Jaga is kind of in silhouette, and then so the first time you see them is that kind of splash panel there, where they all get named. So yeah, I felt the same way. There is a big twist right at the end, and that was the first moment where I felt like, oh, they really are going to take this in a different direction, right? Mm-hmm. But I this is an unfair comparison, but I just keep thinking about the Energon universe stuff and how they're also taking the basic structure of the original Transformers and G.I. Joe shows and kind of in the case of Daniel Warren Johnson's Transformers, like retelling it in a way that is very compelling and very contemporary. And then I think in the case of like Duke and presumably the upcoming G.I. Joe series, kind of taking the basic idea from the original show and kind of modernizing it. I didn't realize until I reread that facsimile of the first issue of the original G.I. Joe comic that the scientist that Duke meets in the first issue of Duke is from that issue.
Yeah.
Like, that's the same scientist. Like, holy crap, I totally forgot this. But anyway, I'm way off track. I just, until that twist at the end of the first issue, I felt like this was not doing as good of a job as those Energon comics were of taking the basic story and updating it. Just felt like a rehash. So I had very much the same response you had, Jeff.
I will because you were like, except for the end, and I was like, what did I forget at the end? So I just kind of ran back and flipped through it again to kind of look at the end. I was like, I had kind of forgotten about the twist ending. And thinking about what you just said, I was like, I would have moved that to the middle of the book, because I think the first 90% of the book is just, if you aren't familiar with the ThunderCats, perfect, like it's great. But if you are, which I think this is going to cater to the people who are, like the first,
and I think that's why I got a little bit more out of the first part of the book, because I haven't watched the original stuff in, I don't know, probably 25 years or so.
Yeah.
I never ended up watching the 2011 cartoon or even the later one. So like, I just really like one other thing that I really enjoyed was just kind of how conservative I feel Declan Shalvey's being with like giving you Mumra and like they're like he's here, we'll get to it, and then at the end there's a panel at the end where like really leaves a huge question, right? Where where I think that's kind of a lot of the story's gonna either hinge or spin off of. So I feel like this issue was like, we're gonna bring you into the world that you know, but then we're gonna go in a bit of a different direction. Maybe a longer issue would have served that purpose to kind of expand a little bit more on that idea. All right, before we move on,
you guys feel like this issue is written for the collection? Like I kind of feel like if you're reading the trade of this, right, you're going to be invested in getting through the first issue because you want to read the others that are in that collection, and then
you get to that last page and you want to turn. So I agree with that. I do like that the art fits the like what I pictured ThunderCats in my head, but it's not just recreating the ThunderCats.
Although I am a little disturbed by Tigra's like chops,
facial hair.
Yeah,
what is that?
It was like the first thing that hit me when I turned the first page was like, whoa, okay, man.
Yeah, that was my reaction. I'm like, am I being old? Like, let's give it a shot. Let's give it through the book, and then, but the whole time I'm just like, it just looks weird. It looks weird.
It feels kind of Dum Dum Duganish to me, it really calls a lot of attention to it. But I think it's really fun. We didn't get a lot of the kids. I keep calling them the kids because it's easier than remembering them. Is it Wild Kitty and Wildcat? That, right? I do hope we expand a little bit more on their relationship with Lionel now that they've reminded me of this, like, oh, by the way, these guys are all the same age, so like it's almost like you lost a friend,
right? Yeah.
Right? So, but yeah, overall, I'm still pretty intrigued. There's a big action scene. Of course, you get the cool, like, ThunderCats, and adapting that to a static medium. I think it's a difficult challenge, but I think this book kind of clear that. I think Drew Moss really made it feel as big as it should be, and then
Yeah.
the lettering also like really added like that big sound in your head of like, oh, I remember what this is supposed to sound like.
Yeah. Yeah. He did a good job of basically taking the various poses during that sequence and just using those as the static panels.
Yeah,
So your brain fills in the action. You're like, yeah, you know. So.
yeah, the big swing. So yeah, so cool. And of course, we'll keep talking about this probably. We're very grateful to Dynamite to let us preview this. So now that you've heard everything that we think about this issue of ThunderCats, I also wanted to talk about. So I went back and I watched the first 2 episodes of the original 1980s ThunderCats cartoon because I wanted to get a comparison of some of the tone, the character designs, the looks, the feel of the story, and also kind of like a little bit of the plot. Right, I think this first issue of ThunderCats gives us what would be the origin, kind of combining the first elements of the first 2 episodes of the cartoon, but obviously everything is taken in its own direction. So I will say the tone of the comic is definitely a lot more serious, a little bit more grown up. I'm not gonna say elevated because I think the cartoon, like, it knew what it was and knew what it wanted to do, but it's definitely a lot more comedic. I think and spoilers ahead for the comic, the exclusion of Snarf is something we didn't really want to talk about in the main review. But if you're watching this deep, you probably have already read the comic. So really interesting that that character was omitted. I don't know if he'll show up later. Maybe it was an element that the creators felt that it was a little bit too much. It would take away from the tone that they were going for. And then of course we don't really know what to expect from what's going on. Right in the first episode, uh, we get to live a little bit longer in the ship, whereas in the comic book, that part is really just brought down to that one page. So we don't really get to see the relationship between Lionel and Jaga, and then Panthro, and how everyone else kind of treated Lionel when he was a kid, and now that he's kind of an adult. So that's very interesting. It was very interesting to go back and watch the original cartoon. Now, I don't think I'll continue to watch it because I want to experience the comic as its own thing. But one thing we are planning to do is to do a first watch of I believe it's 2011 Thundercats, maybe 2016. I think it's 2011. Cartoon Network put out another Thundercats that was very short lived, but it had an updated animation style. So I will say one of the things that I enjoyed the most in the comic and in the cartoon is when Lionel unleashes his sword. Uh, the motion of it, like, that was captured perfectly, and I think we talked about it in the main part of the video. But Lionel's emotion is captured very well by Drew Moss, so that was one of the things that I really appreciated. So yeah, we'll definitely keep talking more about Thundercats, and stay tuned because we'll be discussing it both in separate videos and on the live. Also, remember, if you're a member of this channel, you get a lot of these videos ahead of time, so make sure to keep track of that. So, as always, thank you for watching, everyone. Remember to share, like, subscribe, hit the bell so you know when we go live. That is most Saturdays, 10 a.m. Central Standard Time. Stay tuned. We have more comic reviews, trailer reactions, TV recaps, all that fun stuff here in the channel. Thanks for watching, everyone. Bye-bye.